I had always believed that even becoming an enemy to one's own mother must carry some trace of etiquette, some faint mercy. I thought that if the day ever came when my child turned against me, he might at least meet my eyes and tell a lie, offer some flimsy excuse before casting me out. But when my son Sebastian shut the door on me that day, without a lie, without a pretext, without even the courtesy of a trembling voice, he left me standing on the doorstep of the home I had built with my own hands 25 years earlier, clutching a single suitcase like an unwanted guest. And as I looked back, I did not see the remains of a lifetime behind me. I saw the wreckage of a grand illusion I had mistaken for a family. The very dough I had once kneaded with love had hardened into the coldest, cruelest shape imaginable, one that now sought to erase me from existence. I felt no urge to scream, no desire to weep. There was only a sharp, freezing silence burrowing deep into my soul, forcing me to question every memory, every sacrifice, every tender moment I had offered them. For on that bitter day, I realized that my life had not come to an end. It was only the disaster, the painful obligation to uncover the truth that had just begun. When my son said to me, "Mom, there's no place for you here anymore," his voice carried neither anger nor regret. It was flat, indifferent, as if he were clearing out clutter, removing an old armchair or rolling up a worn rug. That's simple. And in that moment, as the child I had devoted my life to dismissed me so effortlessly, I felt a crushing weight press against my chest, stealing my breath. A few years earlier, I might have endured the small humiliations. His wife, Phoebe, taking her own mother and siblings on family holidays while conveniently forgetting to include me. Or Sebastian's quiet complicity whenever she belittled me, murmuring, "Let's just focus on the kids, Mom," instead of defending me. But this final act, casting me out of the very home I had helped them buy, was his declaration that my existence was no longer an inconvenience, but an intolerable stain on their bright, polished new life. Yet it was I who had given them everything, every last penny of my late husband's savings, even the engagement bracelets I'd kept from my youth so they could afford that luxury flat they now threw me out of. For me, as a mother, the greatest investment had never been jewelry, comfort, or security. It had been my son's happiness, my grandchildren's future. And as I stood in that doorway, clutching the only suitcase I had left, shame burned through me, the shame of my own foolish trust. Now I had just one bag in my hand and a heart frozen by betrayal. I had nowhere to go, no one left to call. I had built my world entirely around my son, and with one motion of his hand, he erased not just my home, but the very meaning and purpose of my life. As I sat later that night in a dim, unfamiliar hotel room, its musty smell offering a strange kind of protection from the humiliation I should have been suffering in my own home, I stared down at the wrinkled photo album on my lap. I wondered when the little boy who once laughed in my arms, my sweet Sebastian, had grown into someone capable of this, and when he would ever be mature enough to face what he had done. In the loneliness and despair of that room, as the emotional storm slowly subsided, grief began to harden into something cold and sharp, analytical, almost forensic. Because I knew perfectly well that a woman of my means, especially one who had bought the flat with her own money, could not legally be thrown out unless she had signed it over. And that realization planted a terrible seed of suspicion. I remembered how Sebastian and Phoebe had pleaded, "Mom, it's just for our security. You'll always be safe," convincing me to pour all the money into the flat without keeping the deed in my name. And how I, blinded by a mother's unconditional love, had handed over everything with absolute trust. Was this, I wondered bitterly, the pure and innocent investment of a mother's heart, or was it simply the cleanest, most calculated fraud, committed by the very people I lived for? Just then, through the thin hotel wall, I heard the muffled sound of a television in the next room. It wasn't the program that caught my attention. It was the faint tune playing in the background, a tune I knew too well, the song Sebastian and I had danced to at his wedding. That strange coincidence felt like a whisper, a warning, a sign saying, "The truth is right beside you." And in that moment, I knew I could not remain a victim. Something inside me stirred, a quiet, steady voice urging me to rise.
As my eyes moved across the bank statements, tracing the money I had given Sebastian years ago and over the property records tied to that flat, I felt my emotions withdraw and give way to a cold, ruthless accountant's logic. This was no longer a son's betrayal. It had become a simple, filthy, legally recognizable case of asset concealment. And in this battle, the most powerful evidence was not the ache in my heart, but the numbers and dates laid bare before me. When I reached the land registry entry and saw in those unforgiving stamped letters that the flat was registered not jointly in Sebastian and Phoebe's name, but solely under Phoebe and her mother-in-law, a sharp cramp seized my stomach. That single line of text confirmed the truth. I had not merely been excluded, I had been lured, step by step, into a long-planned, meticulously executed financial trap. Realizing that Sebastian's signature during the transfer had nothing to do with protecting my assets, but everything to do with securing his marriage, shattered whatever trace of maternal softness I had left. My son had placed his wife's family above me, and with the very money I had given him, he had built the power to throw me out of the home I had paid for. That night, I understood that I had lost far more than a roof over my head. I had lost every ounce of faith in my son's character and morality. The deed to that flat was no longer a legal document. It had become a certificate of betrayal, proof that a mother had been stripped of her home and her worth. And once I confronted that truth, I knew this fight would not be about revenge. It would be a battle to reclaim my honor, to retrieve the sacrifices stolen from me. The young solicitor helping me, the daughter of my former neighbor, looked over the documents with an expression that mirrored my own cacophony of emotions: shock, disbelief, and moral disgust. Through her wide, troubled eyes, I recognized the moment she too grasped the cruelty of a child capable of treating his own mother this way. And for the first time since all this began, I felt less alone. When she leaned closer and whispered, "Mrs. Helen, according to this deed, Mr. Sebastian has no legal ownership of the flat at all. Everything is under his wife and mother-in-law." The betrayal took on an even more grotesque dimension. My son had not only thrown me out, he had forfeited all of his rights as well, reducing himself to a dutiful servant in his wife's family, willingly becoming their financial pawn. Minutes later, as we continued through the paperwork,
I learned the only legal path available to me to prove that the money I had given Sebastian had been a loan, and to initiate a claim that the property had been obtained through fraudulent means. It would be a long, exhausting, emotionally brutal fight, but I was determined to see those names on the deed fall beneath the weight of the truth. From that day forward, her desk became my war room, and my bank receipts became my arsenal. I set aside tears and mourning. I resolved to wage a quiet, relentless, methodical battle to show the people who cast me out of the home that should have been my refuge the cold, unforgiving face of justice.
During those slow, bureaucratic weeks of preparing for legal battle, even though my solicitor constantly warned me, never confront them emotionally, everything must be proven, I could not resist the desperate urge to see with my own eyes how cheerfully the people who threw me out of my home carried on with their lives. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was the need to understand the true price of their peace. Sitting in the back seat of a parked car, watching Sebastian stroll past the flat where I once felt safe, his face looked tired, but not with remorse. There was no trace of guilt, no shadow of hesitation. It was as if he had completely forgotten the mother he had shut out behind that door, resuming his life as if nothing had ever happened. Later, I saw Phoebe's mother, the real legal owner of the flat purchased with my money, step out of the doorway and usher my grandchildren into her luxury car. That sight struck me harder than any insult or eviction. The children I had held, fed, protected, and loved were being raised under the roof of the woman who had helped push me into the street, nourished by the wealth I had poured into that home. In that moment, I understood. My fight wasn't only about reclaiming a property deed. It was about reclaiming my stolen role, the grandmother I should have been, the mother they erased, the place in that family that had been handed to others while I was discarded. Seeing those women thrive off the scraps of my life, basking in the comfort built from my sacrifices, made everything inside me shift. It was no longer an emotional wound. It had become a matter of justice, cold, structured, and entirely factual, just as my solicitor had urged. When I signed my name, Helen, at the bottom of the claim form, the same name they had screamed out of their home, I felt as if some of the crushing weight I had carried for years had transferred into that single stroke of ink. That signature was not a plea, not a cry, not a mother begging to be seen. It was the official declaration of my resolve to answer their cruelty, not with tears, but with the unyielding force of the law. My solicitor told me that once the legal notice was delivered, Sebastian and Phoebe would be shocked, perhaps even desperate to reach me. But I knew this time the first word belonged to the law, not them. And after what they had done to me, I had earned the right to let them feel the silence they had once weaponized against me. In fact, the waiting period became a kind of purification. Every phone vibration, every unexpected message notification felt like a tremor in the tidy little world they had built on deceit, evidence that their comfort was beginning to crack. I didn't need to hear their voices to sense their fear. It pulsed in the silence like a distant alarm. I imagined the exact moment when Sebastian and Phoebe realized that their mother had become their legal adversary, and that the flat they had secured with my money was now in jeopardy. And I knew then the only response worthy of that moment, the only only response that mirrored the day they cast me out was the one they had taught me themselves: silence, coldness, and absolute refusal.
With my solicitor's permission, I listened to the first audio recording he had obtained. The voice on the tape no longer belonged to the cold, detached son who had shut the door in my face that day. Instead, Sebastian sounded like a cornered man, a panicked businessman losing control. "Mum, who is this solicitor? What are you playing at? Stop this nonsense," he shouted. And that tone revealed something I had never expected. My once beloved son was terrified, not of losing me, but of losing face in front of his wife's family. Then came Phoebe's voice, shrill, frantic, laced with insults aimed at me. "That old woman can't prove anything. We'll just say the money was a gift." Her words didn't wound me. They empowered me. Because now their guilt, their fear, their desperation had become legal evidence, not emotional blows. My solicitor reminded me once again that these emotional outbursts would count heavily against them in court, and that my strength lay not in answering them, but in staying silent and focusing on my bank transfers and witnesses. It was the easiest instruction I had ever been given, for my love for them had died, replaced by the merciless clarity of truth. As I left the solicitor's office that day, I felt the ache of the wound inside me slowly freeze into a cold, immovable determination. No matter how hard they might try, my goal was not to destroy them, but to reclaim my stolen dignity. To show them that their mother was no fool, no puppet, but a fortress of justice. My solicitor had already anticipated one of their possible defenses, claiming the money I gave Sebastian was a gift rather than a loan. To counter this, she examined Phoebe's mother's bank activity. What I saw on that screen was the final nail in the coffin. Immediately after the property deed had been transferred into her name, Phoebe's mother had sent almost half of my money to her own siblings. That transfer was more than a financial transaction. It was proof of a calculated, systematic betrayal, and it strengthened our case for fraudulent asset transfer, as the woman had used my money to buy the house, secured the title under her name, and then attempted to disperse the remaining funds through family accounts to hide the trail. It was a disgusting, deliberate financial scheme in response to my generosity. Suddenly, Sebastian's role in all of this became painfully clear. In an effort to please his wife's family and appear indispensable to them, he had handed over my money, allowing Phoebe's mother to gain complete control of the deed, and then to protect himself, he had thrown me out. The saddest truth was this: my son had sacrificed his own mother, only to become a tool in another family's hands. That deed was no longer a property document to me. It was a revolting contract, one that showed the exact price my son had put on his own honor. And in that moment, I understood that my fight was not only about reclaiming that home, it was about refusing to allow Sebastian to be used like a puppet by his wife's family, not at the cost of my life, my money, or my dignity. In the midst of this legal war, The deepest wound in my heart was the silence of my grandchildren. The last time I had seen them, they had clung to me with their little arms, and now, despite the cruelty their parents had shown me, not a single call, not a single message had reached me. That silence cut me more sharply than anything else. I realized then that the children had been forced to sever all contact with me under their parents' watchful eyes. It was more than physical exclusion. It was the quiet theft of my place in their hearts, orchestrated by Sebastian and Phoebe with deliberate precision. My solicitor warned me that involving my grandchildren in the case, even indirectly, could harm them emotionally. And as their grandmother, this was the most painful decision I had to make. My love for them stood in the way of my pursuit of justice, and so I chose to keep their innocence untouched by this filth. In that moment, I made a silent vow. I would set aside my longing for them, not out of defeat, but to prove that my love for them was the one thing their parents could never purchase, manipulate, or silence. They could take my money, they could take my home, but they would never strip me of the place I held in my grandchildren's hearts. When Phoebe's solicitor sent a formal settlement offer, I knew panic on their side had reached its peak. They offered me half the money I had given them on the condition that I drop all legal action and abandon every claim against Sebastian. It was both an insult and an admission of guilt. Though my solicitor gently said, "Helen, this could be a quick way out," the rage that rose inside me as I stared at that letter made the truth clear. This was not about money. This was about the humiliation they had forced me to endure, the exploitation of a mother's love, the destruction of my dignity. Accepting half the amount would have been nothing short of surrender. "I don't want half a shame," I said quietly. "I want full justice." They needed to pay for the arrogance and coldness of the day they threw me onto the street, and that price could only be paid by restoring the fraudulently transferred deed to its rightful owner, not by offering scraps of money to buy my silence. When my solicitor tore the settlement letter in half, the final knot of tension inside me loosened. There was no turning back now. This battle would end in court. The truth would be laid bare before a judge, and Sebastian would finally have to answer for the day he sacrificed his own mother to ingratiate himself with his wife's family. As I walked down the corridor of the courtroom, it felt as though I had stepped into a time machine, not toward the cold-hearted Sebastian who once cast me out, but toward strangers wearing grotesque masks of shame and fear. Phoebe's mother stood there draped in the expensive clothes bought with my money, throwing me looks dripping with disdain, while I stood before her clothed in nothing but the dignity she could never purchase. I saw Sebastian avert his eyes the moment they met mine. In that instant, I understood that his fear had little to do with losing money in court. What terrified him was the prospect of the judge hearing in full daylight the betrayal he had committed against his own mother. To prove his loyalty to his wife's family, he had made me a participant in a fraudulent scheme, and now he would face its consequences before the law. When Phoebe's mother looked at me so dismissively, as if I were an elderly woman meant to disappear quietly after gifting them the flat, I realized once more that a wrong done to a mother returns with a force far stronger than money.
As I stepped through the courtroom doors, I left the last trace of maternal softness behind me. I was no longer his mother. I was the claimant, and I had brought the very case that would force Sebastian to answer for the day he left me standing on the doorstep like discarded waste. Phoebe's tense posture in the witness stand, her inconsistent answers under the judge's questioning were the first signs of victory. When she claimed, "Mrs. Helen lent us the money, we were supposed to repay it within a year," my solicitor struck swiftly, dissecting her lie with questions about dates, repayment terms, interest agreements, and written contracts. Phoebe's panicked glance toward Sebastian, silently begging him for help, was nothing but pathetic theater to me, and Sebastian, in that moment, saw clearly what his sacrifice had cost him. In his wife's family's eyes, he had become a symbol of weakness. That spectacle was worth more than any financial compensation, for it showed him exactly what he had traded his mother for. When my solicitor submitted the chart showing how Phoebe's mother had immediately transferred part of the money to her own relatives after the deed was signed, all color drained from Phoebe's face. In that moment, she realized the truth. The money I had given was not a loan. It had been used as a tool to secure instant control of the property under their names. Phoebe's desperate, furious glare toward me felt like a challenge, but I answered her with the same icy clarity I had felt on the day they threw me into the street. She understood then that in this war, emotions meant nothing. Only the evidence mattered, and there would be no turning back.
Sebastian's desperate, trembling presence on the witness stand was neither a comfort nor a triumph to me. It was a heavy, bitter ache, the pain of watching my own son, who once cast me onto the street, now reduced to a pitiable figure trapped inside the very lie he had built. In that moment, I realized I had not only lost a child, I had watched my son's honor shatter in the pieces right before my eyes. And when my solicitor asked him the fatal question, "Mr. Sebastian, when you evicted your mother, were you aware that the property deed belonged neither to you nor to your family?" I saw the breath leave his body. The silence that followed echoed across the courtroom like a confession. It revealed what he had done with horrifying clarity. To prove his loyalty to his wife's family, he had sacrificed me, making himself a willing pawn in their scheme. And now he stood there, finally facing the legal consequences of his betrayal. Phoebe's mother, watching from the benches, regarded even Sebastian's emotional collapse with cold calculation. To her, his tears were not grief or shame, they were weakness, another obstacle to be managed. That look told me everything. They had never cared about my son's heart, only about the deed to the house bought with my money. And in that moment, I understood that Sebastian had not sacrificed me, he had sacrificed himself. His marriage, his pride, his dignity, all traded away for their approval. His tears on the stand were not tears of remorse. They were the tears of a man who finally understood the trap he had allowed himself to fall into, a trap built with my money, shielded by their greed, sealed by his own blindness. And I, standing silently in that courtroom, showed everyone there how a mother's heart could break and still become steel in the pursuit of justice. The judge's cold, formal voice cut through the air like a blade as she listed each of the manipulations. Phoebe's mother's fraudulent transfer, Phoebe's inconsistent statements, and most painfully, Sebastian's moral failure in evicting his own mother. By the time she reached the conclusion, the entire courtroom felt frozen. I realized then that justice was never won through emotional pleas. It was won through the bank statements my solicitor had unearthed, the land registry documents, the transfers, the lies, the cold logic of evidence. When the judge ruled that the fraudulent portion of the deed registered to Phoebe's mother was void and ordered that the money I had provided be returned to me with legal interest, I felt the weight of that day, the day Sebastian shut the door in my face, lifted by the firm hand of law and restored as truth. It was not simply a legal victory. It was the reopening of a door he had shut, forced back open by justice and dignity. The shock and fury on Phoebe and her mother's faces were deeply satisfying. They had imagined I would crumble, remaining the silent victim. But I had shown them that when you wrong a mother, the consequences are not only emotional, they are cold, financial, and inescapable. As I left the courtroom, I felt Sebastian watching me. His gaze held no hatred, no love, only devastation and regret. And in that moment, I felt not the impulse to forgive, but the peace of knowing that the justice I had built would force him to confront his own lies. The hardest part of this journey was finally over, and as I walked away, I knew that the money awarded to me was more than compensation. It was the foundation of a new beginning, the financial fuel for reclaiming my worth and rebuilding my life on my own terms. When I saw the large figures printed on the bank receipt, the sum that represented my years of labor, my stolen dignity, and the justice finally returned to me by the court, I felt no triumphant cry rising within me, no rush of vengeance, only a quiet peace and an overwhelming exhaustion. I knew that money could never restore the time or the love taken from me, but it could give me one thing I desperately needed, the means to begin again. I told my solicitor, "This money is not for returning to my old home. That place lies buried under the rubble of the lies Sebastian built with his wife's family, and I will not live among ruins. This will go toward building a new home, one I will create with my own hands, in a way that honors Arthur's memory." It was not merely a financial decision, it was an emotional declaration of independence. As I walked out of the bank that day, my mind held a clear plan. I would buy a small, peaceful flat in a coastal town near where I grew up, a place touched only by my name, shaped only by my choices. It would be a refuge that Sebastian's lies could never reach, a place where even my grandchildren would visit only with my permission. For years, I had believed that happiness depended on family, on a surname, on a shared address. But that day, in the courtroom and on that receipt, I had learnt the greatest lesson of my life. True happiness rests not on the love others give you, but on the love and respect you reclaim for yourself. This money returned to me at last was a monument to my victory. It was the clearest possible way of saying, "You cannot throw me away." And I took comfort in knowing that the people who stole my home would now be forced to watch me build a new beginning from a distance, while living with the chaos they had created and the shame of a son who had betrayed his own mother. When I held the keys to my new flat, I felt I was unlocking not just a property, but my freedom. This small, sea-facing home became the symbol of a new chapter, untouched by Sebastian's deceit or Phoebe's cruelty. It was quiet, it was modest, but it was mine. My new neighbor, Mrs. Edwards, welcomed me with a warm smile and sincere kindness. A kindness I had been denied for years by Sebastian's in-laws.
Her hospitality reminded me that genuine human goodness still existed, untainted by greed or manipulation. As I hung the framed photo of my late husband Arthur on the wall, that gentle smile I had loved for decades, I whispered silently to him, "I defeated the lie that betrayed you, and I rebuilt our honor." And in that moment, I felt with absolute certainty that Sebastian's betrayal could never erase the 50 years of love and dignity Arthur and I had shared. In fact, it had forged me into someone stronger. The sound of the ocean outside my window was no longer a cry of sorrow. It was a lullaby of peace and forgiveness. I did not forgive Sebastian, but I forgave myself. The trusting, naive Helen who believed too easily, loved too deeply, and gave far too much. I forgave her for not knowing better, and in doing so, I freed myself from the weight of the past, ready to open a new, honest page of my life. From now on, my life would not continue in the shadow of Sebastian or Phoebe. It would continue under my own son. The woman thrown into the street that day no longer existed. In her place stood a new Helen, the captain of her own life, unbroken before injustice, and most importantly, a woman who chose to love and live again.
The knock on my door that day felt nothing like a new battle. It felt like the unexpected fulfillment of the deepest longing in my heart. When I opened it and found not Sebastian nor Phoebe, but my grandchildren, Ethan and Emily, standing there with eyes filled with guilt and desperate affection, it was a greater reward than any courtroom victory I had ever won. Their love was the one inheritance no one could steal from me. Their trembling embrace, their tear-filled eyes told me everything. No lie, no pressure, no parental manipulation had managed to sever the bond between us. They had been forced into silence by their parents, but their hearts had remained untouched. When my solicitor later told me that their visit had not been arranged as some emotional trap, but was simply the children's own plea to see me, the last of my unease melted away. It wasn't a visit. It was their quiet rebellion against the moral wrongs of their parents. Sitting with them on my balcony overlooking the sea, I realized that their innocence was the purest remedy against the filth Sebastian and Phoebe had created. In that moment, the walls of lies that Sebastian and his wife had built finally crumbled, and the truest, strongest bond in my life grew even deeper. I understood then that my greatest victory had not been won in a courtroom, but in the hearts of my grandchildren. Their love was worth far more than the returned money or the restored deed. A few days after their visit, when my phone rang and Sebastian's name appeared on the screen, I felt neither shock nor anger, only inevitability. I had known he would wait until he was cornered legally, pressured by his wife's family, before attempting to contact me. And now I was ready to hear the hollow remorse in his voice. His voice trembled through the line. "Mom, I'm so sorry. It was all Phoebe and her mother's idea," he said, stacking excuses like sandbags. I replied calmly, "Sebastian, everything was proven in court. You threw me out knowing full well the deed wasn't yours. You knew it was fraudulent." The sharp truth stripped away his mask of false repentance instantly. He said he wanted to rebuild our relationship, that he wanted my bond with Ethan and Emily to continue. But I told him plainly, my trust in you and your wife was destroyed, not by emotions, but by court rulings and bank records. You traded your respect for me in exchange for the approval of your wife's family.
That kind of betrayal is not something you wash away with a few sorries. When he asked, "Mom, what can I do for you to forgive me?" it struck me not as humility, but as an insult. Forgiveness is not a request. It is the result of honor and sincerity, and he had neither. I told him I would not rebuild what he had destroyed. My life would continue, and any future contact would exist only for the sake of Ethan and Emily. Nothing more. When I hung up the phone, I felt neither triumph nor hatred, only a deep, quiet fatigue and the bleak understanding that Sebastian was not a man who deserved the mother he had lost. I did not choose vengeance. I chose my life and the freedom I had fought so hard to reclaim.
That day on the beach, walking along the shoreline with my grandchildren, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. When Ethan leaned toward me and whispered, "Gran, you know, Dad and Mum had a huge argument the day he kicked you out. It revealed the hidden chaos behind Sebastian's cold cruelty. It turned out he hadn't just thrown me out, he had shattered his own marriage in the process." And when Emily added softly, "Dad was exhausted. Mum's family pushed him a lot," I finally saw the full picture. Sebastian had not only been a perpetrator in that fraudulent deed, but also a trapped accomplice. Yet even this did not excuse his betrayal. No marriage, no pressure, no in-law intimidation could ever justify abandoning one's own mother. I turned to the children and spoke gently but firmly. "Your grandmother loves you very much, but we need rules. What happens between your father, your mother, and me, that is not for you to carry. You will not repeat their words to me, and I will never burden you with what they have done." This was not merely a rule. It was a vow to protect their innocence. Their quiet understanding was my greatest comfort. Despite the collapse of the false family Sebastian and Phoebe had tried to build, my bond with Ethan and Emily stood strong, the only true home I had left. As we walked away from the beach, I realized what truly mattered wasn't Sebastian's regret or Phoebe's rage. It was my peace and the fresh, honest beginning I had created with my grandchildren. Years passed gently after that storm. With a small portion of the money I had won back in court, I opened a little second-hand shop in this charming seaside town. It was more than a business, it was my sanctuary, a place where I rediscovered my own worth through objects others had discarded. Every item in that shop carried a story of second chances, much like my own life. Even that old silk shawl from my youth, found tucked inside an abandoned suitcase, reminded me that not everything thrown away is lost. Some things simply wait to be loved again. Each customer who stepped through my door became, in their own way, a friend, a confidant, a reminder that life still held beauty. I was no longer the abandoned Helen clinging to Sebastian and Phoebe's lies. I was a woman standing on her own feet, dignified, capable, and cherished by the people of this small town. They returned to me something Sebastian tried to steal, the quiet respect owed to a mother. The serenity that came from reclaiming control of my life was the greatest wealth I had ever known. My diary now held no place for fraudulent deeds, court battles, or Phoebe's anger. Instead, it brimmed with travel plans, new courses, and budding friendships. And one day, when I closed the shop at sunset, I realized something astonishing. When Sebastian threw me out, he had not destroyed me. He had pushed me into the life I was meant to live all along. I was no longer the woman left on a doorstep with a suitcase. I was Helen, forging my second spring with my own hands, standing tall in my own light, no longer living beneath someone else's shadow, but beneath the warm and steady glow of my own sun.
When Mrs. Edwards walked into my shop that day holding the local paper, it wasn't a shock to me, only the confirmation of an ending I had long expected. The headline reported that Sebastian and Phoebe, after losing the money I had won back in court, had fallen into deeper financial turmoil, and Phoebe's mother, following the fraudulent deed investigation, was now facing legal scrutiny of her own. As I read the article, no joy, no sense of triumph stirred inside me, only a quiet sorrow, and the stark clarity of seeing how flimsy the life Sebastian built on deceit truly was. It was never a home, only a sandcastle waiting for the tide. When Mrs. Edwards asked, how could they fall so low when they lived in such luxury? Her words felt like a gentle warning. I replied, my dear, no life built on someone else's dignity and hard work ever brings lasting peace. For I knew Sebastian's collapse was nothing more than the natural consequence of his moral fall. Their downfall was not my victory, merely the truth revealing itself. My peace, my grandchildren, my hard-won life were worth far more than their financial wreckage. Their story no longer had any place in mine. My life would continue not in the shadow of their ruin, but in the light of my own effort and serenity. Later that day, when I opened my door, I found no wealthy businessman, no proud homeowner before me. Instead, a hollow, exhausted Sebastian stood there, crushed beneath the weight of his lies and his wife's family's expectations. It brought me neither pain nor anger, only a deep sadness at the realization of how completely he had sacrificed his life to money and manipulation. Sebastian told me that the moment he lost the deed, Phoebe's family had turned their backs on him and forced him out of the flat. I looked him in the eye and said, my son, you didn't lose everything when you lost that deed. You lost everything the day you threw away your honor and your mother's love. My words echoed inside him like a brutal awakening. Faced with his late, fragile apology, I told him, forgiveness doesn't lie with me. It lies only in your own conscience. I no longer judged him, but he would live forever under the judgment of his own actions. I did not ease his suffering. I allowed him to stand face to face with the consequences he had created. Watching him drink a glass of water in my peaceful new home was not a threat to me. It was evidence that my life had taken the right path, far from the chaos he had chosen. In that silent moment, he understood what I had always known. The day he threw me out, he had thrown away the only true refuge he ever had. When I closed the door behind him, I felt neither anger nor triumph, only a profound tiredness and the bittersweet peace of knowing that Sebastian was finally forced to confront the ruin he had built with his own hands.
As I shared stories from my youth with my grandchildren, tales of struggle, dignity, and resilience, I taught them, without ever preaching, just how sacred a mother's love and honor truly are. I did not tell them their father's version of events. I told them mine. For I wanted to exist in their lives not as someone defined by wealth or inheritance, but as a grandmother built of love, strength, and truth. That day, I realized I was the author of my own story. I was no longer the helpless woman manipulated by Sebastian's wife's family, but a woman standing tall on her own labor, her own integrity. That, to me, was the greatest inheritance I could ever pass on. I was no longer the woman thrown out into the street. I was a woman who rebuilt her life with her own hands, who entered the second spring of her life shining under her own sun, not someone else's shadow. I reclaimed my life despite the lies of Sebastian and Phoebe, and that was my greatest victory. Never forget, a mother's love and honor can never be bought, stolen, or corrupted. I share this long story not as a tragedy, but as living proof of the unexpected resilience of the human spirit, a spirit that, like the sea, remains calm and unwavering even after its fiercest storms. Being cast out that day was not an ending for me, but the painful and necessary beginning of reclaiming my worth, my dignity, and my freedom. The deed to that home was not merely a property document. It was a vile testament to how a mother's love and labor had been so shamelessly exploited. By winning that deed back, I showed Sebastian and Phoebe that I would not remain silent in the face of injustice, and that I was fully capable of building my own justice with my own hands. On this journey, I learned that forgiveness is not something granted to others alone. It is something you must grant yourself. I forgave the terrified, abandoned woman I had once been on that pavement. And in that moment of self-forgiveness, I freed myself from the weight of the past and stepped into the most beautiful chapter of my life. Never forget, a mother's love and honor can never be bought with money nor destroyed by deceit. And when you take the helm of your own life, no storm can ever pull you off course. Remember this too, no matter how plundered it has been, every heart, in time, will bloom again.